Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
Look closely at the southern coast of New Zealand's Taranaki region, and you'll find a town occupying a fraction of a square kilometer, Waitotara. Today, its demographic footprint is exceptionally fragile. The population hovers around 70 residents, with a median age of 54.3 years. In recent decades, the town's physical infrastructure has taken heavy hits. Severe flooding forced mass evacuations in 2004, and a devastating fire consumed the 104-year-old Waitotara Hotel, the area's main grocery and postal center, in April 2025. But compare this shrinking footprint to the town's output in the summer of 1914. From a remarkably small base population, Waitotara mobilized 120 soldiers for the First World War. By the end of the conflict, 24 of those men had been killed. This extreme casualty rate transforms Waitotara into a localized case study. It allows us to track exactly how an industrialized global conflict extracts human capital from isolated rural populations. The removal of 24 men from a pool of just 120 represents a massive extraction of labor and lineage in a single generation, leaving a demographic gap that remains visible when comparing its history to modern census data. The economic conversion of Waitotara began almost instantly. Within weeks of Britain declaring war on Germany in August 1914, locals formed the Waitotara Patriotic Society. They aggressively mobilized the town's available resources. Children were sent to harvest cocksfoot grass seed from the roadsides, which was then sold to agricultural seed agents. Adults organized regular revenue streams, hosting a well-attended patriotic ball in the Waitotara Hall every second Thursday to consistently direct local capital toward the war effort. Meanwhile, weekly women's knitting circles took over the physical manufacturing of supplies, rapidly converting raw wool into finished goods to ship to the front lines. To see how these macro-level war demands affected individual households, we can look at the Hurley family. Bill Hurley operated a busy coach and cartage company in town. When he enlisted in the Wellington Mounted Rifles, he left the entire operation, along with their 6 children, to his wife, Elizabeth. With a severe labor shortage, Elizabeth quickly liquidated most of their horse-drawn wagons. She used the capital to purchase a Ford truck and 2 motorized overland automobiles, then pulled her oldest son out of school so they could both learn to drive. Faced with a sudden labor vacuum, families like the Hurleys turned to rapid mechanization, creating a temporary but necessary reorganization of who managed the town's essential transport and industry. This network graph traces the Arthur Warsup family tree. It illustrates how the state tapped into multi-generational family structures, pulling 4 sons from this single household into the military. In May 1918, Francis Arthur Warsop was killed in combat in France. His brothers Alphonse and Archibald survived the European theater and returned home. But in 1921, both men succumbed to their battle wounds, systematically collapsing this branch of the family line. The demographic destruction extended well past the armistice. Returning veterans carried severe respiratory damage from mustard gas, like Edgar Jago, who died in 1922, or contracted lethal diseases like the influenza that killed Ernest Bunn while he was held as a prisoner of war. The attrition cut evenly across class lines. Waitotara residents Leslie Birch and Leonard P. Cave were both alumni of the prestigious Wanganui Collegiate School, pulled from their family farming operations into the infantry. Birch was deployed to the Somme in 1916. While acting as a trench runner, delivering messages to headquarters during an active engagement, he was killed instantly by an artillery shell. Back in Waitotara, men like Cave had spent years clearing heavy timber and stumps to build cricket pitches on their land, intense physical labor that unknowingly prepared them for the brutal earthworks of trench warfare. By systematically erasing multiple sons from established farming families, the conflict permanently deleted an entire generation of agricultural leadership from Waitotara. Alongside the Pākehā settlers, war records confirmed the deployment of 16 Maori men from the Waitotara area, affiliated with the Ngā Raru Kitahi iwi. Before leaving, these men observed a specific cultural protocol, pausing at Tutahi Church. Because the church sits on the site of the 1869 Tauranga-Ikapa conflict, this act directly connected their indigenous resistance in the colonial wars to their new imperial service. Initially grouped into a distinct Maori contingent, the command structure shifted in early 1916. The troops were integrated into the Pioneer Battalion, a unit dedicated almost entirely to logistics and heavy engineering. The Pioneer Battalion executed high-risk infrastructure work, digging trench networks and constructing railways across contested ground, often under active enemy fire. Private John Morhu, a former freezing works employee from Waitotara, served in this capacity with the New Zealand Tunnelling Company in late 1916. Morhu was part of the engineering teams preparing the massive subterranean Aros caverns in France, excavating and reinforcing the chalk tunnels ahead of the 1917 Allied offensive. Above ground, the casualty list continued to grow. Sergeant Major Harawini Wakarua, who had survived the Gallipoli campaign, sustained severe shrapnel wounds to his thighs and neck, dying in a field hospital in January 1918. In response, Wakarua's father, a 41-year-old Anglican minister named Iwayora Tamaiparea, enlisted as a direct replacement. Following through on a promise to take his son's place in battle, he deployed overseas with the Pioneer reinforcements. Whether through deep earth excavation at Aros or the construction of surface-level supply lines, the specialized labor performed by the Pioneer Battalion provided the logistical framework required for large-scale offensive operations. Meanwhile, the war disrupted global shipping logistics. In July 1917, the Union Steamship Company's freighter, the SS Waitotara, caught fire and was destroyed in the Pacific. The historical record is definitive. All 44 officers and crew members survived the incident and safely arrived in Sydney. But the facts quickly decoupled from the local narrative. Stories began circulating among sailors of a charred, glowing hull drifting through the ocean, a ghost ship of the Waitotara seen long after its destruction. This apparition perfectly aligns with established maritime folklore, echoing the centuries-old archetype of the Flying Dutchman. Operating within the terrifying information vacuum of the wartime Pacific, isolated communities processed their anxiety and distance by transforming dry bureaucratic shipping reports into enduring local mythology. Looking at this topographical map, we see how Waitotara encoded systemic trauma into its physical geography. The layout is anchored by memorial architecture, the Waipapa Marae Archway, the domain's memorial gates, and plaques inside St. Mark's Church. When the memorial gates opened in December 1925, they were deliberately left blank. By choosing not to inscribe specific names, the architecture reflects a universal community loss rather than individual casualties. Further down the coast in Wanganui, the Mutoa Gardens Monument achieved a different milestone. Dedicated in 1925, it was the first memorial in the country to explicitly honor the Maori soldiers who served, bearing the names of local men like Harawini Wakarua. Among those local casualties was Tame Putonga. As the son of a prominent chief, Putonga was destined to inherit tribal leadership before he was wounded and subsequently died. His death represents a direct extraction of future political authority. Today, Waitotara is navigating the modern consequences of these historical extractions. Ravaged by floods and fires, the population has dwindled to just 70 people. But against this fragile, contracting settlement, the heavy stone and concrete of the bicultural war monuments remain totally unyielding. The physical town of Waitotara continues to shrink, yet the casualty data inscribed into its monuments will outlive the local population, leaving the landscape itself as a permanent record of the true cost of industrialized war.